If you follow me on Instagram, then you would have seen that last week, or maybe the last 2 weeks, I've been working on a crime scene with my students to help introduce to them some strategies that we're going to be using in reading workshop. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, she's doing some sort of like room transformation. Y'all, it took me like 20 minutes to set it up and it cost me like $5. And I feel as though there's this now need and desire for room transformations to cost you over $100. So I'm going to talk to you about how I did this activity, because it's not a room transformation, it's just an activity to help them understand how we use reading strategies in everyday life. What happened, who did it, investigate and look at each. So every year at the beginning of the year, I always do some sort of kind of warm up. I call it a warm up because we're not really getting into groups yet. I want to kind of get an idea of what is it that my kids remember, what do they know, how are they coming in as readers, where are they as readers. And in order to do that, I don't really throw them into reading workshop. I kind of ease them in. We do some really fun activities before I have to assess them completely to the point of exhaustion. That's basically what it ends up feeling like. So I decided that I wanted to do some sort of a crime scene activity. Now, last year I was working a lot with 5th and 6th graders in reading workshop, and I kept telling them, guys, this is like being an investigator, it's like being a lawyer. And it finally got to the point where I was like, this is literally what it's like to be an investigator or a lawyer. And I wanted my kids to get a better understanding, especially if I was going to keep bringing that up all year, of what I meant by that. So they have to really pay attention to all of the details. They have to pay attention to all of the objects that are there. They can't just walk in and say, oh, I know what it is. They can't automatically start assuming. Eyes up here. Set up. There we go. They can't just walk in and automatically tell what it is. They have to first pay attention to all of the objects. They have to gather the information first. Guys, just like in reading, you have to gather that information first. You have to understand what you're reading. So this is where the crime scene comes into play. Y'all, this is nothing that my brain came up with. I simply started figuring out how to make the connections for my kids. And that's what room transformations, activities, anything that we're doing, that's where it's important, is helping kids connect the dots. They are not going to do that by themselves. You have to help guide them and help them see those connections. So y'all, this thing is really, really old. So I have this book that is literally falling apart, and it looks like this. It is the Mystery Festival Teacher's Guide. So this book was published in 1994. Yes, I'm still using it. And this is for K2. It has 2 different investigations. It has a K2 investigation, and then it also has, I think it goes from like 3 to 6th grade investigation. So obviously I did the older one and I modified it. I didn't do it all the way that it tells me to do it inside of this book, and I'll get to that piece in a bit. Let's talk about the setup for the first day. On the first day, you don't give the students any information. I set it up exactly how it told me to set it up in the book. It took the entire time during my lunch, so I only have little snippets of what the crime scene looks like. I can't show it to you here. So I had the kids come in, they all went around the crime scene, and they just stood there and looked at it. I wanted them to pay attention to the details. When we were done with that, then I placed them into groups of maybe about 4 to 5 kids per group. Then what I had my kids do is, once they were in their groups, I gave them one piece of cardstock that had a number on it, and I also gave them a stack of sticky notes. And I told them that the crime scene, what ends up happening after the first day, they start to clean it up. So the crime scene's not going to be available this entire time. So what you're going to have to do is, using your observations, being very detailed about it, you need to be able to draw the crime scene and also take notes of any type of evidence. So being able to describe as much as possible. So on that first day, I'm going to bring you a little bit closer. Ooh, super close. So on that first day, the kids had these pieces of paper that they had to go back and forth to be able to draw the area that they were assigned on this cardstock, because they knew that they were not going to have the materials there to see tomorrow, and they needed to remember every piece of evidence. So that's where this sheet of paper came into play. Once they were done with that, they had to investigate and look at each of the pieces of evidence to put them into a log. So their log was the sticky notes. They were just plain old sticky notes. They wrote down what it was and they made observations about that sticky notes. Then they put down test results at the bottom, because they knew that eventually they were going to get to the point where they could test them, but they had to be able to bag them, take note of what it was, and then place it inside of a bag for it to be investigated and tested a little bit later on in the investigation. So this was the entire first day, and y'all, they flippin' loved it. I feel like we're getting really up close and personal right now. So on the second day, when we got back together, this is the important part. Whenever you do any sort of activity that is a little bit more outside of the actual reading realm or writing realm or any content area, you always want to come back and connect it to what you expect. So I created this very gorgeous anchor chart. It's not gorgeous. And basically what it says, investigate and reading. Just like investigations analyze a crime scene, readers analyze their books. So as investigators, the first thing I asked them, I said, tell me what were some of the things that we did yesterday as an investigator. They said, we examined the crime scene. They described evidence, and they illustrated the scene. Those were the three things that I asked for them to be able to do. And then I said, well, how do you think those three things help you as a reader? And so they said, we read closely. Being able to describe things, you're really looking at every single detail. They described using their five senses. That's what we do in writing to help us describe the setting, the events, whatever is occurring. They're using their five senses. They're summarizing. They have to kind of put it in a very statement that basically tells me what is it, what's happening there. They visualized, because already when they were standing around, students said, I was picturing what happened for the crime scene to look this way. So they were visualizing the events in their head. Even though I didn't ask them to do this yesterday, they were already beginning to infer, because they wanted to figure out, based off of the evidence that they had, what happened. And then finally, they asked questions. They were already beginning to ask those questions, even though I did not have them do that yet. So that's what we connected it back to. Now here's where it ends up getting really interesting. So after we have that conversation, we make the connections between what we did as investigators to what we did in reading. Then we were presented with information. So this is the first time that I'm in that. Oh, there goes one of the sticky notes. This is the first time that I'm presenting information to the kids. So I give them the story about Felix. This is the person who has gone missing. We don't have a body. There's blood. There's a crime scene. Something has happened to him. So this is where we learn more about him. So I have the kids listen, and I have them listen a couple of times. And then what I ask them to do is to then go back out and just on an index card, hard, nothing fancy. I have them recall all of the information. So they're having to be able to listen to the information and write down as much as they remember. This is very similar to retelling and or summarizing. So again, I'm getting them to use some of these reading skills. Once we do that, I have 4 volunteers come up to the stage and they decide that they're going to read the suspect statement. So we have what we know, like information about them, which are in little bullets, and then we have a suspect, just phrase, paragraph of what happened. What did they say happened? Like, what is their side of the story? So they come up, they read it out loud to the class, and then I immediately turn the mic around and I give it to someone in the audience, is what I tell them. And I tell them to then summarize to me what they just said. So they were having to use their listening skills, their speaking skills, their summarizing, their retelling, all of that kind of was taking place. And so we did that with each of the suspects. Then I had the kids go out and, using the sticky notes that we had before, but it had all of the information on it, they then wrote down on sticky notes just the big title of all of the pieces of evidence. And then we started talking about, where does this evidence go based off of what we know about each of the suspects, what we know about their statements, and what we know about Felix, the person who has gone missing. And so we start classifying, where does the evidence fall? Like, if we found shoe prints, were we able to identifying it using, there was like an evidence sheet that had the suspect's footprints and it had like their name on it, so the kids were able to match it up. So based off of those pieces of evidence, who does it belong with? And then this is where the good part goes, that comes into play. We started to talk about the type of evidence that it is. Is it hard evidence? Meaning that, oh man, this is like good stuff. This is really gonna help us in identifying what happened, who did it, and why. And so that's classified as hard evidence. Then we had soft evidence, where the kids were not really sure. They said, it seems like really good evidence, we don't know yet. So we classified it as soft. And then we had some that were classified as unimportant. We just said, you know what, like, even though it was there, we don't think that it is going to be important. And then this is where that conversation, yet again, helping them connect the dots with reading. We talk about how in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, we're really working on truly explaining our thinking when it comes to what's happening in stories. And when we explain, we use evidence, but we also have to explain, why does it go with that person, but we also have to determine which evidence is the best for what we want to explain. Not everything is going to fit perfectly. So that's the conversation that we end up having here, and the kids did a really, really good job at it. I was so impressed with them. Like, I'm gonna bring you closer. So you're gonna see here, this is Kendra. Say hi to Kendra. Kendra has a soft, she has a hard evidence, she had another hard one, and then she had a final hard one. I think a lot of kids at the end of it, I'm just gonna tell you, they all think Kendra did it. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not gonna tell you to the end, but they all think that she did it. So this is where classifying it and determining, is it important? And again, they had to be able to say that this piece of evidence went with this because of these different reasons. So when we were talking, it wasn't them just saying, oh, the shoe print, the paintbrush goes with Kendra. We had to say why. The shoe print goes with Kendra because she is the only artist, and artists use paintbrushes. So they had to use those sentence stems, like, as we were going through and classifying this, and we did that as an entire team. So it was a really, really great and fun activity. Now, the last really big activity that we had to do is we had to then take the evidence that we had put into bags, and we were going to test it so that we could determine, and this is where, y'all, I didn't like go word for word on this book just because there were a lot of testing. I think this was made mostly for science. I didn't want to use it for that purpose. It wasn't me trying to do all these crazy experiments. Like, y'all, back in 1994, they were able to do a lot of things. Like, they were able to set things on fire. Like, I can't set things on fire now. So I ended up not doing all of the different activities. So I picked some. I didn't pick all of them. But again, the big piece is that I wanted them to see how finding the right piece of evidence, how explaining that evidence, explaining their thinking was so unbelievably important, because that's what I have to drive home as readers. So I placed them into these little buckets. Y'all, I got these like back when I taught kindergarten, so it's been 5 years, 6 years maybe. I probably bought them like my second or third year of teaching. So I got these from the Dollar Tree. They're fantastic. I love them. I use them for everything. So I just organized each of my stations in here. I had 5 different stations. The first station that I had was back at what I just showed you with the suspects and the hard, soft, and unimportant evidence. And so there, the kids had to then take the suspect statements, because there was a lot of time stamps that were happening. And just on like a sheet of paper, the kids were responsible for creating a timeline. So they had to put, based off of what the suspects were saying they were doing at certain times, on one timeline as a group. So I had them grouped back together. So they worked together as just a team to create one timeline, and that was the first rotation, or one of those rotations. The second rotation that we had, and this kind of fit a little bit with the timeline, because what I started noticing is the timeline was taking forever and this one wasn't taking forever. So the kids got to toggle back and forth for 2 rotations on this one. So this one is and this I just copied out of the book. It was fantastic. Let me tell you, this is just a DNA strip. So they had a hair that was found in a comb at the crime scene. I told the kids that the hair basically ended up going and getting tested in the lab. DNA results came in, and so now it was their job to analyze the results to be able to tell like where did the hair come from. And really quick, I just got to back up because I just remembered this part. After we did the suspect list and where the evidence fell, I had my kids just online. We have a discussion post that we were able to do. The kids typed up a discussion post of who they think did it. It was like a whodunit discussion post, and it was really just a prediction. I wanted them to go ahead and start predicting who they felt like was responsible for whatever happened. And so we left it very, very open. And so the kids already got to start doing some of those predicting, using that prediction skill. So now fast forward back here. So this is them just having to tell me, oh, where does it go? Now, I did not accept the hair in the comb matched Felix because it matched. No, that's not, and this is how I explain it to them. I was like, that is not what a DNA specialist would do if they were to go onto the stand. They wouldn't just say, well, judge, it just matched. Not acceptable. You need to explain to me DNA. You need to explain to me the purpose of it. You need to explain to me how you were able to say that it was that person's. So they had to do a lot of explanations in their discussion post. So for every single one of these rotations, the kids had to go and respond to a discussion online to be able to tell me what they observed and, you know, the thinking behind that. So this was station 2. Station 1, again, was the timeline. Then I had, oh bless, this one was fun. So this one was a handwriting analysis. So there was a piece of tag board that was found that had imprints of where a note was written. So the kids had to then place the sentences. It's very, very faint. You're gonna see it there. They had to place these in order to come up with what did the note say. And once they did that, they then had to take the handwriting and go back and tell me who wrote it. Now here's the trick. Kendra's handwriting matched the handwriting on the tag board. However, it said, love Vera. I think Vera or somebody was trying to frame somebody else. Dum dum dum. So this was another one. And the kids were picking up on that, y'all. Like, it was so interesting and funny.
Felix is dead, and I'll be rich soon. The deed is done. Love, Vera.
What do you say wrote it?
Kendra, because it's her
And what does it
name.
say at the bottom?
Love, Vera. She tried to frame us.
And then as we were going along, what I loved, this was the best part about it, is that the kids were starting to realize, you know what? This piece of evidence that we weren't able to put along with other people, I figured out where it fits. And so they were moving evidences around on the board based off of all of the information, and after they had an opportunity to talk and to you know, think things through, they were changing stuff. And so that's what it's all about. Then they had one where it was a handwriting. So they had gloves, they could wear one glove. I was like, y'all are not wasting all my gloves. And then they had cups that had fingerprints, and I just used cocoa powder and a makeup brush to be able to make the fingerprints show up, and it worked out fantastic. Like, ooh, you're not gonna be able to see it. I'm sorry, guys, I'm so sorry. Like, ooh, there's a little bit, I don't know. So fingerprints, they had to look at the fingerprints and then classify it based on the fingerprints that were taken from the suspect.
Yeah, but like before he died. Yeah.
But do you remember what did it say in the statement? What were they doing before he died?
Coke in the cups.
Yes, exactly.
So that was another one. The kids really enjoyed that one. And what was interesting is that I told them, you can't just look at one fingerprint on the cup. You think that when they send it in for testing, they only look at one and say, oh yeah, that's all we found. No, they look at all the fingerprints on the cup. Why? Because they have to take in every piece of evidence and make sure that nothing else is left off or unaccounted for, or, you know, maybe somebody else did show up. I don't know. So this was the next one. The last one is somewhat of a testing. So there was a paper towel that had a brown substance. Now we know from the suspects that one of them liked chocolate, like candy with chocolate coating, and then two other suspects had a brown felt pen. So the kids had to take the cuts from the crime scene. They had to do an experiment where basically they put one dot on another like blank. Let me see if I have some. I do. They had to take one of these. Shall we do this together? Let's go to a shop. And they just made a dot, like so. And then they had to, oh, look at this. This is a two-sided one. They had to take the coating that was found at the crime scene. I don't know how much of this I have left. Ooh, I have some, guys. And then place it on another napkin like that. So we have our two tests, because we were trying to figure out, is what's on the napkin brown coating from a candy, or is it from a felt pen? So that's what we had there. Let me go and put some water in here, and I'm going to show you how the kids did the experiment. Okay, I'm probably not gonna look at y'all very much. So then what they did is they took, gave them a pencil that was not sharpened, but we're doing a pen for right now. And they taped it one on each side. And there's like directions in all of these little areas. So they had this like here, and then they took the piece from the crime scene. So I'm gonna take this one and put it onto another pen. And we didn't want to mix them up, and they labeled it, and they did like a way better job than what I'm doing now. And they just simply placed it in, and they watched what happened. They made an observation of which one did it fall in line with. So you're gonna see like that has, ooh. And so the kids were able to say, oh, it matches the brown coating. So that was the last one, which was more of an experiment than any of the other ones. So those were the only ones I chose. Y'all, like seriously, this book probably had like 3 days worth of experiments. I wasn't trying to do science. I was trying to do reading. So after every one of those, the kids went on, they did their discussion, they told us what they found from the evidence, the test results that they found, they gave their explanations, and then that was it. The last day of it, they had to come up with their theories, and boy, oh boy, they had some theories. And they had in their brain all of these different ideas. Here's the best part, y'all. Yesterday, we were changing gears, doing something different, and the kids go, "Are you going to tell us who did it?" And I said, "We don't know." And y'all, they were so upset with me. They were unbelievably mad. But here's the thing, and this is how I explained it to them, because we're constantly going back throughout this entire process talking about how does this help us as a reader. And the very end, we talk about how in reading it's so unbelievably subjective. Our own experiences, how we interpret things, our schema, the things that we know, everything kind of takes into play of what we believe happens in a story, or how we interpret events or characters or whatever it is. That just because somebody has a different thought than someone else from a story doesn't make them wrong. So long as you have the evidence and you can explain and back it up, who's to say that you are not right? Now, obviously, there are certain things in reading that are, yes, they can be right or wrong. But a lot of the times when you get into those bigger, like higher level thinking skills when it comes to reading and writing, who's to say you are not right? If you can back up your thinking sufficiently enough, you might be right. And so I tell the kids over and over and over again, guys, I'm like the judge. I shouldn't have to read the story. You should be able to summarize it well enough, tell me what's happening in the story. You should be able to tell me what your stance is on whatever it is that I'm asking you, back it up with evidence and explain how that evidence relates to your stance. And I should not have to read it and completely understand whether you're right or wrong. Because that's what we do every single day in reading. So that was it. That's it in a nutshell, guys. So I wanted to share this with you, and I wanted to share this entire thing because I thought it was such an unbelievably, like an amazing experience for my kids. They loved it, and it helped to make everything click for them. But I want to leave you guys with this. I want to leave you with what reading is not. Guys, reading isn't about everybody being on the same book. Reading isn't having to answer a bunch of questions after they read a story. Reading isn't reading passage after passage after passage after passage. Reading isn't about everyone being right. And we as teachers need to stand up for what we believe reading is and teach it that way, no matter what others say. Because when we do that, powerful things happen. You start to see real readers flourish and grow in your classrooms. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope that you guys enjoyed this little explanation of how I took this crime scene, which was created back in 1994, which was meant for science, and how I changed it to fit my reading, but also how I did it without spending $100, without making something super glowy and crazy and like really over the top. Because y'all, these kids had fun. They loved every moment of it, and it didn't matter that I had a cute paper with the right fonts and the right clip art. I gave them index cards, sticky notes, and a card stock. Literally all I did. It was fantastic. So I want to leave you guys with that. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this, or if you have another way that you like to explain reading, especially in upper elementary, because it can be really hard and abstract for our kids. So if you have another way that you explain reading to your students, or something fun that you like to do at the beginning of the year to kind of kick off reading workshop or writing workshop, leave them down below, because I love to hear some of your ideas. This is just one of the ways that I like to be able to kick it off. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting this channel. Make sure to give it a video a thumbs up for me, please. And I will see you all really, really soon. Bye. Also, if you haven't already, I would stop by, go to upgradeed.education, because we have an unbelievable offer right now. So we're getting down to the last week of being able to get the pre-launch sale. It's at 10% now. So if you missed the 20% mark, you still get at least 10%. So 10% off using the code pre-launch to be able to order any of the courses. Guys, these courses were made to help you. And something to keep in mind is behavior management is not just a beginning of the year thing, it's an all year long thing. Building community, helping form those relationships, working on individual behaviors, on whole group behaviors. So if you are kind of starting to see, you know what, I may need some extra support with some behavior management, pick the course that's right for you. You don't have to do the big bundle, but pick the one thing that you feel like you really want to grow in. Student teachers out there, yes, this course is absolutely for you, so don't hesitate. This is a really good opportunity for you to go ahead and dive into it, get some experience, and then try it out during your student teaching. So thank you so much for supporting us. For all of you who have supported Upgraded, we are very excited to be able to launch this. And yeah, it's a really, really great feeling. And we would not have been able to do this without any of you. So thank you so much to our followers. We love you all very, very much. Have a great one.